Amid the tremor caused by the gigantic creature, it moves slowly. The enemy examines the surroundings and soon realizes that he understands what is happening there. The fluid spread across the ground indicates that a fatal blow has been executed, and the opponents are defeated. Next to a crystal, the character lies down, while blood flows around him. The protagonist is seen prostrate on the ground with swords nearby, demonstrating his inability to act. The image focuses on the bloody face, revealing determination and fury. Suddenly, an unknown threat appears, destroying an entire continent instantly. The creature declares itself the executioner of humanity, appearing to be extremely powerful. United, they seek to protect humanity, trying to avoid the approaching disaster. Emanating from the antagonist, the energy exposes the absurd power he holds. Brian Miller, a shield that protects the world, resisted a colossal meteor. Bella Albright, a great sage, is said to have power comparable to that of an entire division. Jacob Bloomfield, a divine archer, killed a high-level dragon with just one arrow. Known as the strongest swordswoman who ever lived, she shows fury. Amy White, the sword saint, displays all her power and skill. The support soldiers are down, indicating that they did not resist for long. Gray Lee reveals himself as a mere sacrificial pawn, appearing to be badly injured. The warrior claims that these opponents are on another level, incomparable to him. He expected that the graduates of the World Union Academy would be remarkable. However, he did not imagine that the disparity between them would be so great, which scares him deeply. He wonders if the presence of the support units makes any difference. Amidst the chaos, the Sword Saint emerges as the team's hope. A golden aura surrounds the woman, showing her determination to fight. Wounded and beaten, the character wonders why all this happened. Despite their arduous training, they failed, because the enemy was too strong. The enigmatic figure moves at high speed, attacking the fallen warriors. A well-aimed attack hits the target, who realizes he has been hit by the enemy. The creature asks if he has injured him, showing curiosity about the warrior's capabilities. The warrior says that, if this is true, he should stop playing immediately. A destructive energy dominates the battlefield, devastating everything around. The creature displays colossal power, dissipating hope. The warriors are unable to even touch the enemy, making him invincible. The protagonist displays a look of despair, finding himself seriously injured. The executioner asks if they are just having fun, because he does not perceive any seriousness in them. He claims to have defeated them with a single blow, confessing that he was just playing around until then. The character concludes that there is no way to win that battle, feeling hopeless. Bodies are scattered all over the battlefield, with blood gushing everywhere. The protagonist is prostrate on the ground, surrounded by a bloody scene. Tears stream down the boy's face, and he wonders about the meaning of it all. Confused, he wonders how much time has passed since his heart was pierced. A mysterious voice echoes, asking if he is still alive. Blood drips into a crimson lake, creating a horrifying scene. The voice announces that it has found him, provoking a disturbing feeling. A bright light emerges from the darkness, signaling a possible new beginning. The light asks the one who holds great power to come forward. The protagonist opens his eyes, realizing that something has changed. Asking about his whereabouts, he concludes that the afterlife is desolate. Confused, the character tries to understand what is happening. A figure appears on a throne, and the protagonist questions its identity. The enigmatic being seated on the throne appears to be extremely powerful. He reveals that the protagonist is not dead, surprising him. The being extends his hand towards the protagonist, examining him. The being informs him that the wounds on his body have already been healed, leaving him perplexed. He questions if it was the being who healed him, seeking to understand what happened. The being explains that it was not him, but rather the protagonist's own power that performed the cure. The boy asks about his own power, unaware of its existence. The being explains that he cannot accurately analyze the boy's power. However, he assures that his power surpasses that of the tormentor. However, he points out that this will only happen if he manages to control it properly. The protagonist asks if he is suggesting that they can win the battle. The being responds that he does not know, and that he should not place great hopes in this fight. Despite this, he believes that they must seek the tormentor anyway. That is why he can go now, because the time has come to fight for real. A bright light emanates from the place, indicating that he is preparing for something. The protagonist concentrates a gigantic energy in his hands, which proves to be incredibly powerful. He announces that he will lend his power to him, granting him a chance at victory. The bodies of the warriors lie on the battlefield, with no signs of life. The blade emerges from the ground, exposing the dark power it carries. Wielding a powerful black sword, the protagonist prepares to fight. The being explains that his power transcends common perception. The protagonist states that he understands and prepares for the final confrontation. The creature wonders what is happening, sensing an unusual presence. Wielding the black sword, the protagonist advances and attacks the enemy, head-on. The antagonist does not believe that there is still anyone strong enough there. The executioner realizes that he has suffered some damage, questioning the reason for this. The boy declares that he believes that his power is superior to that of his adversary. The enemy warns him not to underestimate him, as he has not seen anything yet. The protagonist advances with determination, seeking to land a blow on the opponent. The fight will be arduous, requiring all of his strength to win. With a furious look on his face, the protagonist shows himself determined not to give up the fight. The protagonist wonders what is happening, staring at the enemy. The executioner declares that he will praise him for forcing him to use all of his power at once. The protagonist is hit by a powerful attack, putting his life at risk. A dark aura surrounds the executioner, intensifying his strength. The executioner's face is revealed, exposing the fury that dominates him. The protagonist's shadow moves on its own, attacking the executioner by surprise. The dark sword cuts through the air, advancing towards the enemy. The protagonist and executioner face each other with all their strength, driven by fury. The executioner wonders what is happening, perplexed by the boy's power. He asks if he is really human, given the extent of his power. The protagonist surrounds himself with dark energy, preparing to attack, manifesting his power. The protagonist advances with determination. The swords collide, demonstrating the strength of the two warriors in combat. Perplexed, the executioner wonders what is happening and why. The fight continues intensely, with neither side showing any intention of giving in. The executioner asks if he is still alive, recognizing his remarkable strength. The protagonist's dark energy protects him, preventing him from being injured. Concentrating all his power, the protagonist advances with the black sword, protecting himself with a barrier. The executioner questions if he is really human. With fury in his eyes, the protagonist answers that this is his question. Exhausted, the executioner did not expect the fight to be so arduous. The executioner declares that he will crush him to death once and for all. Locked in an intense fight, the situation worsens with each blow. Surprised by an attack, the protagonist feels intense pain. Concentrating all his power, the executioner prepares for the final blow. Energy emanates from the executioner's body, showing confidence in the fight. Joining his hands, the executioner creates a powerful barrier. With time running out, the protagonist prepares for a new attack. The protagonist wonders what is happening, noticing that night has fallen. The boy's face is bloody, showing serious injuries. Questioning his intentions, the executioner prepares to counterattack. The swords collide, releasing sparks all over the place due to the force of the blow. The protagonist expresses fury, intensifying his energy. The executioner declares the uselessness of everything, stating that nothing can hurt him there. He suggests that he stop resisting and look at the stars, as the end is approaching. A glow appears in the protagonist's eye, signaling a transformation. The protagonist's eyes shine brightly, strengthening him. With a psychopathic look, the executioner asks if the stars are beautiful. A light appears in the night sky, and the protagonist observes it attentively. Moving towards the light, the protagonist feels certain of victory. A burst of light dominates the battlefield, resulting in total destruction. Struck by the light, the executioner is thrown away. Watching the scene from above, the protagonist witnesses the moment when the executioner is struck by the light. Desperate, the executioner fears annihilation and the impossibility of returning. Lightning streaks across the sky, and the executioner wonders what is happening. A colossal energy appears, and the creature witnesses the manipulation of time. The being declares that the power he has gathered is vast and sends him back. In disbelief, the executioner wonders if that power emanates from Kronos. The being reveals that he can hear him and uses all of his power at once. He announces that he will send him back to the past, seeking to change the future. Enraged by the situation, the executioner utters the name of Kronos. The being declares that this is all he can do for him, and sends him back. Time quickly passes, with the numbers decreasing until they reach 1. Entrusting the fate of that world to him, the being sends him back to the past. The protagonist appears in the middle of a forest, disoriented as to his whereabouts. He notices that his clothes are different, as is his physical strength. Trying to understand what is happening, he wonders about the place he is in. As he observes the landscape, the protagonist recognizes the place. Confused, he remembers that that place is his hometown. Noticing that he is in Renato village, the protagonist wonders what happened. He concludes that the place shouldn't be there, since it was destroyed 15 years ago. Remembering the being's words, he begins to believe that he traveled back in time. The protagonist is shocked, as he had no idea that this would actually happen. Looking at his arm, he feels the pain of the wound he suffered in battle. He remembers that, back then, Belder and the others always bothered him. Furious, he says that he can't allow guys like them to defeat him again. The protagonist remembers the strength of those individuals, which he could not overcome. He concludes that defeating the tormentor was just a dream, but then realizes the truth. Reflecting on how to deal with them when he is stronger, he tries to avoid injuries. Walking through the forest, the protagonist comes across his tormentors. Claiming that he was looking for them, he claims that they made him go through a lot of trouble. Belder instructs him to take the sword and prepare to fight. Confused, the protagonist does not understand what is happening. Belder warns him not to pretend not to understand, and proposes a mock fight. The protagonist refuses, claiming that his wound has not yet healed. Belder assures him that there is no reason to worry, since the blade is blunt and safe. The protagonist objects, stating that, even though it is blunt, the blade is still metal. He warns that if he hits someone in the wrong place, it can cause considerable damage. Ordering him to be quiet, Belder advances towards the protagonist. Attacked by surprise, the chapter comes to an end. Belder asks if he thinks he has the right to refuse and attacks him. He proposes that if he does not like swords, he can fight without one. Irritated, the protagonist wonders what happened to the mock fight. He remembers that before he went back in time, a military doctor told him something. He remembers that the reason his fencing wasn't improving was due to an injury. The protagonist thinks that maybe that's where his life of failures began. Belder attacks the protagonist with everything he has, delivering a swift and accurate blow. Confused, the protagonist wonders what's going on. Belder realizes that his blows have always been slow and tries to improve. Belder attacks him again, but the protagonist moves quickly. Belder notices that the attack didn't hit him, and is surprised by what happened. Desperate, Belder questions why he couldn't hit him. The protagonist realizes that he's the one who's become faster, not the enemy. Belder's friends notice that he moves differently, as if he were another person. The protagonist concludes that, although he doesn't have the same body as before, he still carries the memories of the battles. But he still has memories of the battles he fought before traveling back in time. Picking up his sword from the ground, the protagonist prepares to finish the fight. Belder attacks him with everything he has, but the protagonist easily stops him. Thrown away, Belder doesn't understand how that was possible. The protagonist wonders if it's okay to fight against such an amateur. Concluding that they don't deserve his pity since they tormented him so much, he charges into the fight. He states that there is no more time to hesitate and charges into the fight at once. Trying to stop the protagonist from approaching, Belder fails in his attempt. Desperate, Belder doesn't understand what's happening. Concluding that he dropped the sword too easily, he considers himself worse than an amateur. He thinks that Belder probably wasn't trained to receive a sword strike. However, he claims that he doesn't need to worry, because they taught him how to defend himself. Holding the sword with both hands, he prepares to deliver a fatal blow. He says that as long as the blade is dull, it is safe to hit someone with it. Desperate upon seeing the blade approaching, Belder feels helpless. The protagonist strikes Belder with the sword, spraying blood everywhere. Stunned, Belder wonders what is happening, without understanding the reason for his screams. Desperate, Belder's friends did not expect that to happen. Belder remembers that he was the one who said that a blunt sword was safe. Facing him with a smile on his face, the protagonist shows himself ready to fight more. Belder's friends approach, and the protagonist prepares to fight. As they charge at Belder, his friends are overcome by despair. Knocked to the ground, Belder bleeds profusely due to the direct blow he received. Asking what is wrong, the protagonist questions the reason for his screams. With a psychopathic look, the chapter comes to an end. Terrified, Belder questions his friends' inertia. He orders them to finish off the protagonist once and for all. His friends comment on his sudden strength, without understanding the cause. Determined to fight together, they attack the protagonist from behind. When asked if they want another round, the protagonist shows confidence. Screaming to kill him, Belder's friends advance towards the protagonist. Smiling darkly, the protagonist prepares to fight for real. Belder's friends run towards him, but he moves with extreme agility. In the blink of an eye, all of Belder's friends are lying on the ground. Upon seeing his friends on the ground, Belder despairs, not knowing what to do. Questioning if that is their power, the protagonist laughs at the situation. Approaching Belder, he asks if their dojo is really good. Belder responds that they feel strong enough, dispensing with training at the dojo. The protagonist reflects that that is what they consider to be strong enough. Concluding that he should not expect too much from that dojo, he ignores it. He thinks that even so it may be useful to him in the future. The protagonist asks Belder to introduce him to the dojo, staring at him fixedly. Asking if entry into the dojo requires a recommendation, he waits for an answer. Belder suggests that he ask someone else, trying to avoid admitting his defeat. Looking at him with a smile on his face, the protagonist asks if they intend to continue. Belder's friend mentions that he already has enough strength to enter the academy. The protagonist thinks that it would be great if that were truly enough strength. He remembers that not even the most powerful team in the world was able to defeat the executioner. Even using that power, he couldn't even scratch him when he got serious. He doesn't know how strong he needs to become to defeat that creature. However, he considers that there is no lack of evidence of how to reach that level. At that moment, he felt it for a brief moment, but managed to control the dark power. What he focused on at that moment was the fencing taught by the Sword Saint. He thinks that if he had spent more time training fencing with her, everything would be different. That must be why Kronos sent him to that place in the past. Basically, what she is trying to say is that he tried to humiliate a civilian using the fencing she taught him, and in the end, he ended up getting beaten up by them. Saria is the fencing instructor at the dojo, and is ready to teach them a lesson. Belder says that they weren't trying to get him to fight, and it was just a joke. Saria asks who told them to come up with such a bad excuse. She says that if they call beating someone unarmed a joke, then what happened just now was also a joke. Saria asks if he understood what she meant, and then approaches. Saria says that if that's the case, then she can do whatever she wants with them. Saria prepares to attack Belder's friends, and the protagonist observes the scene. Saria urges them to leave and never return to that place. She declares that they can no longer consider themselves students of that dojo. Belder's friends hug each other and leave the dojo. Saria apologizes for what happened, mentioning that her former students caused problems. The protagonist downplays the situation, thanking them for their help. Saria reveals that she heard about his desire to get a recommendation to join the academy. The protagonist confirms, showing anxiety in receiving the recommendation. As an apology for the problems that Belder and his friends caused, Saria says that as much as she wants to write a letter of recommendation for him, she needs to confirm his skills first to see if he's really good. The protagonist says he understands and then prepares to fight her. She says he can make the first move and waits for him with open arms. The protagonist advances towards her and then they strike sword blows. Saria thinks his fencing is quite practical for his age and observes him. She says it's as if he's already been through countless real battles. She realizes his style is self-taught, but it looks like what they teach at the dojo. Saria wonders who taught him, but realizes his fencing is very rough. She says he has a lot of talent, and is a rough diamond that needs to be polished. Saria says it's sad to see that, but it's time to end the fight once and for all. Saria prepares to fight with everything, and the protagonist stares at her. The swords collide with force, releasing sparks into the air. Saria advances towards the protagonist, trying to hit him with determination. Saria wonders why he hesitates in the fight. Confused, Saria asks how he can keep up with her in the fight. She explains that she only intended to test her skills, but ended up giving in completely. Furious, Saria doesn't understand why she is so afraid of that boy. Tired, the protagonist manages to dodge the accurate attack. Saria attacks him again, and he narrowly escapes the blow. Realizing that the attack was in vain, Saria wonders what happened. The protagonist declares that she has finally revealed her weakness on the battlefield. Determined to end the fight, Saria tries to hit him by any means. Saria attacks with everything she has, but the protagonist defends himself in time. Saria realizes that he used the same power he used in the fight against his tormentor. The protagonist confirms that he has that power, even though it is in the past. Surprised, the protagonist feels a strong blow on his back. Questioning what happened, Saria asks if he is okay. He explains that his body could not withstand all the power used. Exhausted, the protagonist's body gives way and he falls to the ground. Saria realizes the danger of the action and asks what happened. Using the power of the Sword Saint all at once, the protagonist ends the fight. The protagonist gets up with difficulty trying to stay steady. Reporting that he can barely stand, He recognizes that he should not use that power. Reflecting on whether he should tell her about it, he gives up. With a look of doubt, Saria does not understand what is happening. He concludes that, even if he told her, she probably would not believe him. With a smile, the protagonist says that he just got a little carried away by the moment. Saria states that it is impossible to cut his sword with a wooden sword. She declares that she is sure that he realized this too. Looking at him, wondering if something is wrong, the protagonist wonders what she is thinking. Concluding that she does not intend to talk about it, he waits. Saria asks if he would like a recommendation to join the academy, awaiting his response. The protagonist confirms, mentioning that he heard that she could provide one. Saria claims to be able to offer a recommendation for the best academy in the kingdom. Excited, the protagonist looks at the image of the Royal Fencing Academy. Saria declares that she cannot recommend him to that place, as he is not suited for it. Disappointed, the protagonist questions himself about what happened. Remembering his lack of strength, he concludes that he cannot do anything in his current state. Saria states that the place he should go is the World Union Academy. The protagonist points out that it is not the best academy in the kingdom, but in the entire world. Shocked by the revelation, the protagonist looks at the image of the World Union Academy. The protagonist wonders if that is the place where the Sword Saint came from. He wonders if someone like him can really be accepted there. She says it is impossible, and that he probably already knows that. She says that his body is not suitable to be a real swordsman. She says that if it were at the real academy, he could fake it with his skills. But he wouldn't be able to pass the World Union Academy because it would be impossible. She wonders how he managed to have so much skill with such a weak body. He says that everyone at that academy is a real monster and gets scared. He says that with a body like that, he wouldn't even be able to compete with them. Saria asks why he is giving up and says that there are 9 months left. The protagonist says that there are only 9 months and that is not enough time. Saria says that she trusts him and then waits for him to train for real. The protagonist looks at her with a confident look and then prepares to train. Saria asks if he is ready to suffer during those 9 months of training. The protagonist says that he does not want to suffer and tries to avoid it worse. The protagonist says he's going to do that and prepares for intense training. The protagonist asks her to take care of him during the 9 months of training. Saria smiles sadistically and then says that that's a great answer. The protagonist wonders what's going to happen and then gets scared by the change in mood. Saria tells him to start hell once and for all, and then the training begins. The protagonist trains with Saria and the days go by very quickly. The protagonist becomes stronger and stronger, and with that he surprises everyone. 8 months pass, and the protagonist becomes very strong with the training. Saria says that he has become much more muscular and shows a slight smile. Saria says that she has nothing more to teach him and asks him to go with confidence. The protagonist asks why he is so early, since there is a month left until the exam. Saria says that taking an exam in a place he is not used to is not easy. She says that it is better to get there early and get used to the place. She gives him a bag with money, and it is enough for the trip. The protagonist says that arriving a month early is not too early, and he cannot accept that. Saria says that it seems like he is trying to expel her from the village anyway. Saria smiles and says that he is overthinking things and that he does not need to worry. Saria says that she heard that they found a nest of ogres nearby. She says that there are almost no guards in that village, and the protagonist is surprised. Worried Dalming. Saria says that they found a nest of ogres, but that it has nothing to do with them. She says that help will come from the royal capital, so they don't need to worry. She tells him to go to the exam without any worries, and then says goodbye to him. The protagonist thinks that she is lying to him, and that no one will help. He remembers that Saria was killed when she went to kill the ogre alone, and then despairs. He says that he understands, and then decides to help the Sword Saint at once. Showing a confident smile, the protagonist says goodbye to Saria. Returning the smile, Saria encourages him to pass the exam. Under the light of the full moon, the protagonist heads to the place. Skeleton bodies scattered throughout the forest, with blood everywhere. Arriving at the location, Saria prepares to face the ogres. Based on the spy's report, she knows that this is where the ogres are. From the top of a tree, the protagonist observes her. Frightened, Saria asks what he is doing there, in the middle of the forest. Coming down from the tree, the protagonist approaches Saria. The protagonist jumps from the tree and then approaches Saria. He expresses his surprise at the absence of the army from the royal capital to deal with the ogres. Saria explains that they were unable to come due to an emergency, and she decided to act alone. She declares that only she is strong enough to deal with the situation, dispensing with help. Knowing the strength of the nest through the report, Saria faces him. She informs him that the leader is an elite ogre, leading about 40 to 50 monsters. Recognizing the complexity of dealing with so many enemies, she sighs. The protagonist considers that an elite ogre is not that strong alone. He considers that the strength of ogres lies in their intelligence and leadership in combat. Warning about the danger of being surrounded, he highlights the suicide of fighting alone. One thing is certain in his mind: he cannot allow her to die. Concluding that Saria would not return alive if she went alone, he despairs. He remembers having witnessed that future and is determined to prevent it from happening. Begging her to take him with her, he promises to help in the fight against the ogres. She insists that she is strong enough to deal with the ogres alone, ignoring his request. Arguing that he does not want to miss the chance to gain experience in real combat, he tries to convince her. Asking if she considers him a hindrance, he tries to persuade her to let him go. She responds that he knows he would not get in her way since he cannot beat her in combat. However, it highlights the uncertainty of what will happen in a real fight in the monster's nest. She suggests that he wait until he has more experience in dangerous fights like that. Staring at him closely, she asks if he really insists on going, stating that in that case, he has an idea to accompany her. Saria wonders about the plan he has in mind to be able to accompany her. He proposes to fight her, defeat her, and deal with the ogres alone. Staring at him fixedly, Saria decides to accept his proposal to fight. Agreeing with the proposal, Saria promises to accomplish that in any case in the battle. Saria asks him to promise that, no matter what happens, he must return alive. Stating that he plans to do it anyway, he stares at her. Recommending that she too not die, they prepare for the worst. Smiling, Saria thanks him for his help. Happy with his attitude, they head to the forest where their fate is about to change. The protagonist and Saria reach the ogre's nest, located on a mountain. The protagonist points out the lack of escape routes, warning of the danger. Noticing that they are overconfident in building a nest there, he warns them of the necessary caution. He says that they cannot escape either, and that it is better to be cautious with everything. Saria says that she understands, and then watches him to see what he will do. Saria says that she does not see the boss anywhere, and that he must be in his tent. She says that she hopes that they reduce the number of monsters before the boss appears. Saria asks Gray to finish off the enemies he finds on one side. Saria says she will go the other way, and then finishes off the enemies there. The protagonist responds that she understands, and then prepares to fight. Saria tells him to go once and for all, and then they start fighting the ogres. The protagonist approaches an ogre and finishes it off with a single blow. Saria moves at high speed and finishes off an ogre that was nearby. One of the ogres screams, and then the other ogres prepare for battle. Several ogres advance towards Saria, and then she prepares to use her power. The protagonist advances towards the ogres and finishes off several of them at once. Saria attacks the ogres with everything and demonstrates surprising power in the fight. The protagonist moves among the ogres and then finishes off all of them at once. Several ogre bodies are lying on the ground, and Saria and the protagonist are alive. The protagonist and Saria finish off the ogres with ease, and then they prepare for the boss. Saria praises her performance, asking if it was her first time. The protagonist asks Saria to stay alert, as this is just the beginning. The protagonist says that they are too weak, and even she could handle it alone. He says that unless something is different, the boss must be in the tent. A tent appears on the screen, and red eyes shine inside with great intensity. The red eyes stare at everything around and are ready to attack. The protagonist feels a shiver down his spine and then realizes that something is very wrong. He says that he needs to get out of there and asks Saria to run at once. Saria wonders what is happening and then looks at him carefully. The protagonist tells her to go once and for all, and then they prepare with red out. Saria accepts his request, and then they run away as fast as possible. The protagonist feels a strange presence and then realizes that he is in danger. Saria says that the elite ogre is there, and then realizes that the enemy is coming. The real boss appears in the middle of the forest and is very strong. The boss's mouth opens, and then he prepares to devour both of them at once. The ogre appears in the middle of the forest, and his strength is far superior to that of the other ogres. Saria wonders what that is, and then despairs at the enemy's power. Saria and the protagonist prepare for the fight and try to defend themselves from the attacks. Several ogres surround the two, and they prepare to fight with everything they have. The Sword Saint despairs, and then the chapter ends with a lot of tension. The the protagonist realizes that it is not an elite ogre, but something much more powerful. Recognizing that it is an ogre general, Saria despairs at that. The protagonist claims that this is the true boss of the nest, and then they prepare themselves. The ogre general appears and demonstrates all his power at once. Saria despairs and says that this is not a monster that they can deal with alone. Saria tells them to finish him off and run away from there as fast as possible. Saria tries to land a blow on the ogre general, but he can easily defend himself. The ogre general approaches to attack Saria, and then the protagonist stops him. Saria says that he was hit and watches the wound heal quickly. The protagonist realizes that there is no point in fighting the other ogres, and so he prepares himself. The ogre general roars, and with this increases the strength and recovery of his allies. Saria realizes that because of the roar, she cannot defeat any of them. Saria asks the protagonist to leave her back to him, and then they prepare themselves. Saria asks him to buy time, and that there is no need to defeat him at all. Saria wonders what he is planning to defeat that monster. The protagonist says that he only has one choice to make, and then prepares. With the help of his swordsmanship, the protagonist advances towards the boss. The protagonist manages to move very quickly and hits the boss with a blow. The monster's body is very close and is very resistant to his blows. Despite the effort, the monster is very resistant and nothing happens to it. The protagonist states that he needs to defeat that monster once and for all. He finds it annoying when people try to flank him in close combat. He decides that he needs to focus on eliminating all the enemies in front of him. The protagonist's sword does not withstand the fight against a strengthened ogre and breaks. Regretting having broken the sword, he mentions having a spare, but predicts that it will also break. Saria suggests that he use her extra sword in combat. Thanking her for her help, the protagonist prepares to pick up the sword. He says that he now has 2 swords, but they are not enough to finish them off, for an ogre general and the other ogres that are there in his way. Saria moves to fight at once and finish off those monsters at once. Saria advances with the sword, and then she cuts the general in half at once. Saria gets up and prepares to fight, and the protagonist makes an expression of fury. Saria tells him to leave it to her, that she will take down all the ogres alone. Saria's sword moves very quickly and is accurate in each blow she makes. The sword saint shows herself to be very confident in combat and advances with everything. Saria shows her power and makes an accurate cut in the chief's neck there. The protagonist says that now it's over and then prepares for the worst. Several ogres suddenly surround Saria, and then she finds herself in trouble with that. Saria says that because she attracted so many ogres at once, their attention was well divided. The ogres advance towards the 2, and the next chapter promises to be very intense. The protagonist determines that he must take down that guy, whatever the cost. Upon reaching him, the protagonist realizes that he predicted his plan. He recognizes that the opponent's intelligence is not just an adornment. Trying to hit the ogre boss, the protagonist faces his skillful defense. The ogre boss demonstrates cleverness, irritating the protagonist at the same time. The protagonist struggles to fight the enemies, achieving some success. Unable to withstand the strength of the ogre boss, the sword breaks. When using a superior power, the protagonist also ends up bleeding. The enemies try to exhaust the protagonist's swords, but fail. The ogres are throwing themselves at you. He can't use so much dark magic. Everyone is very close. The protagonist screams and tries to stay close to the 2 with the help of the blade. Saria is startled. Saria approaches with much greater power. Several ogres are protecting the general. The boss's power is too much. The blade is activated again. There is no time to waste. There is no choice. Saria comments that he did not do badly at all, and asks him to be careful on the way. The protagonist asks Saria to stay alert, as they are just starting out. Saria approaches with her sword and then finishes off the boss in one go. The protagonist bleeds a lot and is close to dying. The protagonist only has 1 sword left and needs to fight with it. He has to fight the ogres and the general with only 1 sword in his hand. He says he knows and that there is no way he can win that fight. The protagonist despairs and then thinks about fighting with everything he has. The protagonist gets up and asks Saria to run away from the place at once. Saria approaches him with a smile on her face, and then they prepare themselves. Saria says she's sorry, but she can't do that to him under any circumstances. The protagonist asks if she's planning to die there once and for all. Saria says she'll go after him and not to worry, and then ignores him again. The protagonist thinks he came in time just to be able to defeat the executioner. He despairs, and then wonders why all this is happening. Saria is hit by the boss's blow, and then blood gushes everywhere. The protagonist says he has no more fighting options and then despairs. He remembers that he fought hard against the executioner, and all his effort was in vain. Saria says she won't let him die, and then uses all her power. The protagonist doesn't know what to do, and then despairs with the terrible situation. Cornered and injured, the protagonist finds himself in a mountainous place. Wielding his sword, he stares at the ground with determination as the fight continues. In large letters, the phrase, "It's not over yet," appears, denoting the long journey that awaits him. The phrase, "If it's the power of that time," appears on the screen, referring to a memory. Concentrated, the protagonist visualizes the phrase, "As long as I can access this power." Seeking to access the power, he radiates a vast amount of energy. The phrase, "Even all these enemies," appears, displaying the monsters that surround him. The phrase, "Remember this," appears on the screen, highlighting the need to use everything he has. "Remember the feeling of that time," the phrase says, as he closes his eyes and concentrates. In his concentration, the protagonist closes his eyes tightly, trying to remember something crucial to the fight. The protagonist's sword begins to emanate a blue aura. A giant red eye opens, evidencing the release of his power. A vast energy expands, demonstrating his power. With his sword wrapped in red energy, he seems ready to attack. A white-haired girl appears, surprised by the man's power, calling him. Visibly injured, streams of blood run down the protagonist's face. Even though he is injured, the man smiles, claiming to be fine and ready to keep fighting. The scene cuts to a monster being cut by the protagonist's sword at high speed. With the head of a monster severed, the protagonist is not joking around. The image focuses on the protagonist cutting off one of his enemies with his sword. The white-haired girl shows surprise at the display of strength. Joining forces, she begins to fight the monsters alongside the protagonist, helping him. Determined to win, the girl's eyes shine brightly during the fight. She claims that the general's power underestimates him, and he needs to prove her wrong. With all her strength, she continues to fight the monsters, with no intention of surrendering. The girl claims that without the general's power, the protagonist is not strong, so he has to prove otherwise. After the fight, the protagonist and the girl remain standing, surrounded by monster bodies. The protagonist apologizes for breaking the girl's sword, who doesn't seem to mind. The girl says she doesn't care because he saved her life, so it's okay because she's fine. When trying to return the broken sword, the girl finds the protagonist hesitant. She approaches and comments on the intensity of the attack, which consumed a lot of his energy. Weak, the protagonist falls to the ground, too exhausted to stay standing. Unable to get up, he collapses on the floor due to exhaustion. Waking up in an unfamiliar place, he wonders about his whereabouts. The protagonist is in front of a strange structure that seems to be some kind of prison or altar. He approaches a large, heavy door that is locked with chains, and he wonders what it is. The door begins to glow with an intense red energy, so something is about to happen. We see the protagonist standing in front of the door, analyzing everything because he doesn't understand what is happening. He realizes that that energy is the power he was looking for, so he is surprised. The protagonist then wonders if by opening the door he will get that power, so he decides to take a risk. Observing the door, the protagonist feels hesitant, but he knows he needs to take action. He walks towards the portal with firm steps because the situation requires courage and decision. An evil aura begins to come out of the door, and the protagonist is enveloped by it, so he becomes frightened. The protagonist approaches and touches the door with his hand because he is going to try to open it. The man says he doesn't know why, but he knows that if he opens that door as it is, he will die. He is very close to touching the door, because that decision could change everything in one go. Time. The protagonist realizes that if he opens the door like this, he will end up dying at once. Then he screams in pain and seems to be suffering because he knows he can't open the door like that. The man wakes up and realizes he is in a bed, in a place he doesn't recognize. The white-haired girl appears and asks if he is okay. because she was worried about him. He asks where he is, and she says he is in the village infirmary because he was unconscious for 5 days. The protagonist is surprised that he slept for so long and says he tried too hard. The girl says that tried too hard is not the right word to describe what he did and complains. The girl asks if his body is okay and if he can move because she is worried. The protagonist tries to move to see if he can, but he can't use his full strength. He realizes that he can move his arm, but wonders if he will still be able to hold a sword. He notices a bruise on his bandaged arm and becomes worried about what might have happened. The girl notices that his arm is not moving well, so she says that he can't use force. The girl says he won't heal anytime soon because he hurt himself a lot, so he'll have to rest. She also says that the bones in his arm are in pieces, so it will take a while for him to heal. We see a magic potion on the table, and the girl says that they used it to treat his injuries. The protagonist is surprised because a magic potion must be very expensive, so he gets worried. The girl tries to calm him down and says that the village chief gave them the potion to use in his treatment. The protagonist doesn't understand why the village chief would give such an expensive potion to someone like him. The girl asks what he's saying because he's being too humble, and she doesn't like that. She says that the protagonist is the hero of the village, so he has to value himself more and not humiliate himself so much. The protagonist is surprised by what the girl said because he doesn't think he's a real hero. The village chief arrives and calls for the protagonist because he wants to thank him personally for what he did. The village chief thanks the protagonist for the magic potion because it saved everyone's lives. He explains that the monster they faced was a very strong ogre general, so he gets scared. He says that not even the forces of the neighboring cities could defeat the monster, so he was strong. The village chief says that if he hadn't killed the monster, the village would have been destroyed. So he is a hero. The chief says that if it weren't for the protagonist and the girl, none of this would have been possible, so he thanks them. He says that if it weren't for them, no one there would be alive. So he really is a hero of the village. The protagonist thinks that the chief is exaggerating a bit because he doesn't consider himself that important. The village chief says that he should know that he's not exaggerating because he saw everything up close because he was there. The protagonist realizes that maybe the chief is right because the village really was in great danger. The village chief asks if he was going to take the entrance test for the World Union Academy, and he confirms. We see the three in the infirmary. Then the protagonist remembers that he needs to take the exam because it's almost time. He realizes that he went to kill the ogre a week before the exams and has already slept for 5 days. So there are 2 left. He says that it's a 3-day walk to the academy, so he needs to hurry, so he won't be late. He says that he could get there in 1 day on horseback, but he doesn't have money to rent one, so he asks for help. The village chief says that he was expecting this, so he prepared the best horse in the village for him to use. The chief says that with her legs, he'll get there really quickly, so they're helping him a lot. The girl says that if he hadn't woken up today, they would have taken him sleeping, so they're friends. The protagonist opens the infirmary door and leaves because he needs to go quickly, so he doesn't miss the test. We see the protagonist's determined look because he knows he needs to do his best to pass. When leaving the infirmary, the protagonist comes across a crowd of people waiting for him on the street. People are holding posters and banners thanking him for saving the village, so they're grateful. They say that he needs to pass the exams because he is their hero, so he can't fail now. They thank him for saving the village because he is everyone's hero, so he feels very happy. A man approaches and gives the protagonist a bag of money because they want to help. The protagonist asks what it is because he doesn't understand why they are giving him money. The man explains that it is something that the whole village put together for him, because they want to help him at the academy. We see people holding posters and banners with messages of support because they are all rooting for him. They say that they heard that it is very expensive to enroll in the World Union Academy, so they want to help. The protagonist is touched by everyone's attitude and feels very grateful for the support he received. The protagonist smiles and thanks everyone for their support, because he didn't expect such a warm welcome. The protagonist says that it will be difficult to return to the village if he fails the exams, so he feels pressured. The girl says that he doesn't need to worry because none of the candidates at the academy have defeated an ogre. The protagonist says that the entrance exam may not be so easy, so he is worried about that. He says that he can pass even with an arm only because he is strong, so he trusts himself. The girl says that the examiners at the academy are not so stupid as to ignore his ability. The girl smiles and says that he will definitely pass, so she trusts his potential a lot. The protagonist thanks her, because with what she said, he cannot fail, because he has to do his best. He says that the village was destroyed in the previous world, but it still exists here. So he has to fight. He states that this world is no longer the same as before, and that the future can be changed, so he will change it. With this power, he will change the future, so he will fight with all his strength to succeed. The protagonist says that he is going now, because he needs to hurry, so as not to miss the exam, and says goodbye. He thanks her, because thanks to everyone he was able to arrive on time, so he is grateful for all the help. We see the protagonist arriving at the World Union Academy, so he is about to start the exam. He observes the academy because it is very large, so he needs to prepare to do his best there. We see a huge coliseum, and that is where the exam will take place, so he is ready to show his worth. They start to distribute the exam tickets, so he needs to get his in order to participate in the test. There are many candidates, so he asks if everyone there is examined and starts to get apprehensive. He then says that only 20 will pass, so he will have to fight to get a place. The protagonist hears that the number of approved candidates changes every year, so he needs to prepare. In some years, they accept 50 people, and in others, only one person is accepted, so it is difficult. Professor Ariel arrives, and she will be responsible for administering the exam, so he is anxious. She says that they will start to distribute the exam tickets, so he needs to get his to start. The protagonist takes the ticket, so he is the 513th examinee of the fencing course. He sees that everyone has already taken their tickets, but is surprised because there is nothing written on it other than the number. The teacher says that the World Union Academy does not discriminate based on age, gender, or ethnicity. She continues saying that they do not care about their nationality, status, or anything else. She states that not even their name matters, and that they only ask the name of those who pass. The teacher says that if they want, they can even give a false name, so they have total freedom. The protagonist wonders what kind of system is that, because he left his sword at the inn. The teacher explains that she assigned the courses according to each one's appearance, so he is surprised. The teacher asks him to raise his hand if she made a mistake when assigning them the courses. The other candidates say that she chose the courses just by looking at them and think, it is a joke. They do not believe that she did this with so many candidates, so she must have seen it before. They think that maybe she uses mind-reading magic, so they are trying to understand how she did it. The teacher says that no one seems to be in the wrong course, so she is going to announce the exam times. He checks his ticket and realizes that his exam is on the first day, so he feels pressured now. He wanted to have more time for his arm to heal, so he is worried about his performance. The teacher says that this is a one-time practical exam and that if they are late, they will be disqualified. She asks everyone to arrive on time and that they will not accept requests to change the schedule, so he worries. The protagonist says that he still cannot put much strength in his dominant arm, so he has to hurry. He asks for his arm to heal by tomorrow because even if it heals a little, it will help a lot, so he is anxious. The next day, the protagonist prepares for the exam and is determined to do his best. The protagonist realizes that his arm has not healed at all, and he is desperate to pass. He thinks that he will have to take the exam with his arm like that, and does not know if he will be able to. They call the next examinee, so he realizes that it is his turn to show his potential, and goes. He says that he cannot be pessimistic because he has to do his best to pass and tries. He realizes that his left arm is fully functional, so he still has a chance. He needs to use the time he has left to observe the examiner's movements, because this can help. He will analyze the examiner to try to find a solution gap and manage to win the fight. The examiner says that he can make the first move, so he needs to take action. The examiner attacks with everything and seems to be very confident in his ability and uses all his strength. He attacks with all his strength and creates a huge explosion with his sword strike to intimidate. We see the examiner with the sword. and he seems to be a strong and skilled man, so it will be difficult. The examiner says that it is not over yet and prepares to continue fighting because he will not lose. We see the two swords clashing with sparks, then the fight is very intense and no one gives in. The two fight with all their skill, then the protagonist tries to defend himself with all his strength. The examiner knocks down his opponent and then says that his exam is over and that he can take his sword. We see the examiner defeated on the ground and he can't believe that he lost and is desperate. The protagonist closes his eyes and thinks that he is lost because he was defeated and didn't pass. He thinks that he didn't make it and won't be able to go home. Then he feels sad and frustrated. He remembers everyone supporting him. Then he doesn't know what he's going to do and feels lost. Someone approaches and says that he passed the exam. Then he doesn't believe it and is very surprised. They call the number 513. Then he gets up and goes to the arena to show his worth. He is surprised to be fighting someone after having defeated a guy bigger than him. The examiner says that he can make the first move, then he prepares to attack with everything he has. He doesn't think he has a chance of winning, but he's going to do whatever he can to win anyway. Manage to pass. He charges at the examiner with everything he has and attacks with all his strength to show his worth. A woman says that a sword is not swung with just the arms, so he has to use his whole body. She says that it is necessary to channel the energy generated by the whole body through the arms, so he has to learn. He realizes that this is what she taught him, so he focuses on using his whole body when attacking. Even though his right arm is weak, he needs to use other muscles to generate strength in the blow. He attacks the examiner with everything he has, then he realizes that his blow is a little stronger now. He thinks that he can't fight like he usually does, so he has to think of a new way to defeat his opponent. If swinging a sword without strength in the arm was easy, no one would train their body, so he will change. The two face each other in a sword duel. So he tries to use everything he has learned to win. He wonders why the examiner's sword is so slow, so he will take advantage of the opportunity. He sees that the examiner has incredible power, but his speed and technique are no match for the master. He thinks that if he uses what he learned from the master, can compensate for the difference in arm strength. The protagonist then decides to use everything he has learned to win the fight, because he will give his best. The two face each other in a sword duel and try to hit the other, so it will be a difficult battle. Everyone agrees that the examiner is slow because he cannot hit the protagonist in combat. The examiner is hit and says that he cannot believe he lost, so he is very surprised. The protagonist realizes that the examiner is not as strong as he imagined, so he can win. He remembers the master saying that he will pass, so he cannot give up and will fight. The two swords clash and sparks fly everywhere, so the fight is very tense. The two continue exchanging blows, so the protagonist thinks he can win the fight. The protagonist says that he can really do that and prepares to finish the fight. Thanks for watching.